Welcome to the Comic Binge. I am your host, Paul Herman, and today we're going to be talking about the last leg of DC's 52. And it's a little bit of a bummer. Not going to lie. A little bit of a bummer. But we are going to be getting into this, and we're going to have a lot of fun. And we'll be joining here soon with Chris Cloud. But while we're waiting for him to figure his stuff out, before I get into everything, please go and hit the subscribe button. I really appreciate it. It helps us out, get out there. That ridiculous YouTube algorithm that we are ever so trying to be a part of. So anyway, appreciate everyone who's already supported the show and the channel. Everything is really, again, super appreciate everybody. And so without further ado, I will bring my good friend here. I'm sorry, I'm fixing up something here for everybody here. Sorry, everybody. Mr. Nico, Mr. Baby. How we doing today, sir?
Hello, man. Happy to be here. You're right. It is kind of bittersweet, the last leg of this, but what a journey it's been. What a journey. 52 issues, 4 shows. Wow. Happy to cap this thing off and go out in a blaze of glory.
Yeah, it's that is putting it mildly, to be quite honest. And you know, it's been interesting, right? Like it's, you know, going through this everything, it's been very interesting to go through and learn about the DC universe, you know, and we'll talk more about that here in a second. But you know, well, Chris isn't here yet. He's still putting his daughter to bed. But I thought it'd be kind of cool while we're waiting for Chris to talk about something that, you know, is kind of relevant. And it feels like it's gone more under the radar than like people like realize. But it's basically something that I'm curious what we haven't really talked about it, and that's going to be the little more clarity look of the new Superman logo that we got. And I wanted to pick the brain of Mr. Baby, and Chris isn't here, so I figure I can burn his britches by talking about it while he's gone. You know, so we got wind that of the, you know, obviously the post from a while ago, you know, talking about the you know, we had the close up look on the snow, I guess you could say, of that whole thing. And that was interesting. That was cool. But yeah, we didn't get, you know, we didn't get the a full look of the brand new logo for Superman, the upcoming movie by James Gunn. Mr. Baby, I know you're a big DC guy. What is your take on this new logo we got here?
So yeah, you know, I'm admittedly not a huge thanks, Adam, my guy, dude. I love Adam. He's the man.
I love Adam.
He's the friggin' best, man.
He really is.
I feel like, so I'm admittedly not a massive Superman guy in terms of on his own, right? I've always only ever read him and, you know, watched him when he's with the Justice League, but I do like the logo. It's kind of, it does feel different. I know there's a lot of comparisons. It feels like the Kingdom Come one, which I have a whole bunch of theories and thoughts on how he's going to kind of reverse adapt that story, but I like it because I do feel like it is a nice enough separation from, you know, what they're doing on TV and what they did with Cavill, and it feels super modern, which is another thing too. So I dig it. What do you think about it?
You know, personally, I'm really into it. Like, I think this is a very interesting like concept, because one thing that I always forget, and Chris, I'll let you in here in a second. One thing I always forget is that this is supposed to be an alien language, right? Like, it's supposed to be a different, like, it's not supposed to be an S. It's supposed to look like that, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the case. And so it's just, you know, it's a symbol. And what I find it fascinating is that it feels like for the first time in a Superman movie, It actually looks like a symbol of something else other than an S. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I fully get what you're putting down here. Absolutely, it does. It does look like it is otherworldly, and it's more crest like as opposed to letter like. So that's something I do really appreciate about it. I'm not sure if we lost you there or not. Okay, cool.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties today.
Oh no, you're good.
The Reverend is here with us, Mr. Baby.
Oh,
so
the Rev.
What's your take on this logo? I haven't really talked to you about this actually yet.
It depends on what the ultimate intent of the movie is going to be to me. I mean, I was kind of hoping, if I'm going to be completely honest, to have something generally a little more traditional from the symbol, but that doesn't mean it's a deal breaker. You know, it's just I appreciate the desire to make a statement and be different more than anything else, but I associate this version of the symbol so strongly with a version of the character that's at the not the I mean Superman's never at the end of his rope, but at a much later point in his career when he is kind of jaded. I mean, Kingdom Come, of course, is the first story that comes to mind, but the 1 year later JSA series where the Kingdom Come Superman actually comes into the DC universe is probably the one that looms a little bit larger in my mind. And that guy's in a very different place. So again, I appreciate that it is going for something unique, especially in comparison to other Superman movies. But we'll see if he sticks with this for the entirety of the film.
That's what I wonder too. I wonder if you'll see a true traditional, more of a clear S by the end of the movie.
And before I throw it back up here, I want to ask you guys really quick. I don't want to get too deep into it, but what gives you this impression? Like, why do you think it's going to change?
I have a sneaking suspicion that, you know, what we know about the movie in terms of what he's going to be confronting about his lineage on both Earth and on Krypton makes me feel like something else that he's going to discover is a symbol that he wants to project to the world that looks like the one that we know primarily. That's totally whole cloth. I mean, I have no idea, of course, but there's something I think it would be poetic if the movie sticks with this symbol for the majority of the runtime, and then the last shot we see of Superman is the symbol that is generally a little more traditional. If that doesn't happen, that's okay. But I feel like it would be a good way to end the movie. Like if we get a last shirt rip and it's the symbol.
To piggyback off Chris, I think I also have some sneaking and maybe even some more clear suspicions that there will also be with like what Chris said, what we know he's going to be confronting and combating in this film. I do think there's going to be other let me bite my tongue a little bit. I think there's going to be a reason to have a look change by the end of the movie to symbolize a lot more. Yeah, I'm going to keep it at that.
Okay. I feel you. I personally, I hope you guys, to be quite honest, I hope it doesn't get to that point. I hope it actually stays the way it is. I like the way it looks. I think it's really interesting and cool. And yeah, I don't know. I'm into it. So Yeah, I wanted, but we're waiting for you, Chris. I wanted to kind of throw that out there. I thought it was really cool to kind of have out there.
No, I'm
But
glad you did
Sorry for the
this.
delay. Sorry
No,
for the
no, it's a
delay.
fun way to
you're
start
fine.
the show.
Yeah, it was yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
My daughter going to bed is getting very unpredictable. So she was just a few minutes ago. She was dancing to Dua Lipa, and now she's apparently asleep. We'll see.
I
But
love that.
you know,
Oh, I love that.
yeah. Are you muted, Paul?
No, sorry, Chris. Why don't you take us into the lead us into the new 52 or the last leg of 52 here?
Oh, I mean, I kind of want to leave the discussion pretty open ended because this is the end game. This is where everything is funneling into the final moments. You know, there is no shortage of revelatory information that comes from this last quarter of the series. Things come to a head with every hanging subplot. Um, you know, we already kind of lamenting what's happening to Vic Sage, of course, and watching his slow decline to me was rather painful. But also, too, you know, the shock associated with what happens with Sobek in particular blew my mind the first time I read that. I did not see, like, I didn't feel like it was telegraphed at all in the moment. Maybe you guys have a different perspective, but that knocked my socks off. And then
Sobek's the crocodile guy, right?
yeah, at least we thought he was just like it's
Well,
cute, hungry crocodile, not friggin' famine. Oh my God. That was just, and I mean, I think all of us over the course of this read through have been pretty enamored with what they've been doing with Black Adam. I certainly was so caught up in what was going on with Adam. And then for them to turn around and make him one of the final bosses of this, even though we've gone on this heroic journey with him for most of this past year, to me, that felt like a masterstroke of storytelling in particular. But then, you know, the story that I was probably least interested in at the outset with Infinity Inc. ended up turning into one of the most rewarding components of this whole book. And, you know, of course, that's because of Lex Luthor. What we see from Luthor, you know, what I want to do after this with you guys, if we can, you know, put it on the schedule at some point, is the 1 year later Superman story that picks up immediately after the last issue of 52. And the way I can't properly explain in words the subplot with Animal Man and Fire. They crash land on a planet, right? But the planet they crash land on is the best possible planet that they could crash land on. I feel such an immense sense whenever Mogo shows up in a Green Lantern story. There's just like this reassurance that comes with that consciousness because, you know, reading Green Lantern concurrently with this, obviously 1 year later was going on, but I mean, Mogo is the consciousness that guides the rings to who they're supposed to have, right? To the bearers that that will carry on the legacy of the Green Lantern Corps in Brightest Day and in Blackest Night, that can stand up and overcome fear. That comes from Mogo. So seeing him appear here is just like, I had such a sense of relief wash over me when he first showed up. But also, too, I mean, this is where we see that the DC universe has been reforged and the DC multiverse has been reforged. It's not the same multiverse we had before Crisis, but it is a multiverse again. You know, we're not skimping around with hyper time or vibrational realities like they've kind of danced around to do multiverse storytelling in most of the post-Crisis period. We have a multiverse back. And the storytelling potential, I can't properly express to you guys. Just the granted, I was fresh out of high school when this story finished. I was about a year out of high school, less than a year, but the storytelling possibilities just felt so vast. It really felt like I was stepping into a larger version of the world that I already loved. And then, of course,
Yeah.
the saga with Will Magnus. I mean, everything to me, this series comes together and leaves us with such an immense sense of possibility. And it just serves as a tour de force of what makes the narrative construct that is the DC universe such an incredible place and a unique place in comparison to other locales for superhero fiction. And even though we know the ins and outs of what's immediately following with all the major characters because of 1 year later, a whole year before this, I mean, it was just great to see that the table was set again for the major heroes to make a return. Um, we get a little bit of service with that, particularly in the final issue, with the Trinity back where they're supposed to be, even though they don't have the recognizable countenances yet. I mean, Bruce Wayne is always going to be Bruce Wayne. It's easy for him to step back into being Batman, but Superman's not there yet. And it was fun to put the pieces together after the fact to see how that came together. And then, of course, with Wonder Woman, this group here needs to do Superman Up, Up and Away, and Who is Wonder Woman. Those are the two stories that I would very much like to do with you guys after this. And it's not 52 issues, so it's a much lighter lift.
Well, if I may interject here, because I'm curious, I've what you guys all think about this. I don't want to echo what I've been saying about the entire series as a whole, and I want to make this very clear. I really like this a lot. Like you were right, Chris.
Oh,
this was fantastic to read, and I'm going to echo everything I said. But I want to say I don't want to undersell it either to a point where you brought up yourself, Chris, as someone who already knew the characters pretty well, that it gave you even a deeper understanding yourself as someone like for me, who doesn't know these characters at all. I feel so much more entrenched in the DC universe, where I always felt like I was on the outside looking in. And obviously, in the last couple of years, I've felt a little bit closer because as we've gotten to know each other more, Chris, over the last like 8 years, whatever, we've known each other. I felt more akin to the DC universe because of that. But I will say that the 52 series that we've read has been one of the best history, like I say history loosely, but like let's say, how about this? Not history. School books, if you will, to read, because it's schooling you in the universe of the DC comic books and the characters, the enriched characters that they have. And I feel like I'm finally can put DC in the same breath with my Marvel knowledge. In the same breath, my Marvel knowledge will always be bigger than DC's, because I was always bored in it, I was raised in it, and so like that's where I cut my teeth in comic book medium. But with DC Comics, the other, I always felt like I was on the outside, like I can't really invest in this. I don't really know the characters as well. It's kind of, whatever. After reading 52, I feel so much more comfortable I can go anywhere now. I mean, I always felt like that already, but I feel even more empowered after reading this. And I feel like, I talked this with Mr. Baby before. I feel like our best shows, the ones that get the most interaction, you could say, are our DC shows. And I'm starting to think like, I wish we might have to do another retrospective of this maybe at some point before, and I'm hoping the DC Superman movie, that comes out, we talked about before, gets bigger, or makes everything, becomes the new MCU, if you will, as far as like being big and put Superman back on the map, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like if that's the case, if that's where it's headed, which I'm hoping it is, then this series is gigantic for the people who want to get into comic books and into DC characters in general. I mean, throw out like, I don't want to read comics very much, or I don't know how to read comics, but I just want to know more about DC characters besides the big ones. I'm like, dude, this is it. Like, this is 52. Go get 52. Like, I'll throw it to you here in a minute, Nico. But before we get the nitty gritty, I've said that for every episode, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm just like I'm lazily saying it. I'm saying it, and like it's kind of a big deal. I feel like they should almost remarket this, guys, as, hey, you want to learn about the DC universe? Read this. Like, all you need to do is like it lays out everything. Just go with it, and you learn so much. So, Mr. Baby, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's beautifully said by each of you. I think it is so rich, like school books, like textbooks. Also, because all the history of various characters and teams are at the end of each issue as well. But I think they choose such an interesting group of characters to be the quote unquote leads, right? And I think what I'm so thankful for is, like Chris said, when he was in high school, I already loved the DC universe so much, and this just blew those doors open in ways. We went to corners of this universe that I didn't even know existed, right? And I think of the cast of characters they used, I think the writing and storytelling is so strong that I think I really understand all the characters they chose to have as these leads. Like, I feel like I want to dive back into, Renee Montoya, where she's at now.
Right.
And now the idea of like an HBO Max series following Booster Gold makes a lot more sense when you see what you can do with it and the type of character that you could create and the journey that you could put them on. And there's a lot of relatability with what's happening with Ralph too, and in terms of loss and loved ones, and there's a lot deeper themes that are going on with like inner demons, personal demons, trauma, questioning who you are. There are so many layers to this thing, and yet it all somehow comes together so nicely at the end, like you said too, Chris, to watch. To see the way they reconfigure the multiverse in this was very interesting too, especially where we leave off with Infinite Crisis. So I would totally subscribe to the idea that this is a fantastic way to dive more into the DC universe and learn about it. And you don't have as much as I hate to say it, you don't have like the heavy hitting characters to distract you going. Every now and then when they show up for a bit though, like when Clark helps them in one of the later issues find a certain villain, I was like, oh, Superman's here. Like, come on, man. You know what I mean? Like, so that was
a sense of reassurance, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even though he can't get in the thick of it again, he's still that guy.
He's still right there. Yeah.
But let me just briefly go over some of the things, because obviously on this show, we've talked about Face to Face. It's a rather innocuous Batman story, but it gets him back in the swing of things with Robin. It's a great story. It's the story where Tim Drake becomes the adoptive son of Bruce Wayne in a very emotional moment. And then Grant Morrison goes off and does what they're going to do with all of their material. I can't tell you how much I love Up and Away. That's why I really want to explore this story with you guys. I mean, he's still powerless at the beginning of it, but you know what's coming, and that makes it better. Added to that is everything that we've seen with Lex Luthor. It's even better reading the story after having absorbed 52, because at the time this issue came out, we didn't know why Lex Luthor was getting out of jail. What did he weasel his way out of? Why are so many people angry at him and accusing him of murdering their loved ones? Well, when you read 52, you see exactly what's going on with that. And it's just incredible. Diana, we see a hint at the very end of 52 of what she's up to in her civilian identity.
That was interesting.
And it gets even more interesting. Alan Heinberg knows what to do.
Heinberg's so good.
And that's why I definitely want to check this out too. I think we need to do a deeper binge into this series overall, but seeing, John's back in the saddle with Tim Drake because Tim has been off the board for so long. This lineup of the Teen Titans is very unique. You got Kid Devil. Cyborg is actually just waking up after the events of Infinite Crisis in this issue. So he doesn't even know Connor's dead when he wakes up in here. And we see the lengths of the grief that Tim and Cassie both have. Deathstroke's daughter is part of the team. I mean, it's a fascinating dynamic. And then you get into the heavy hitters. This is a phenomenal series. You had Brad Meltzer, who's coming off of one of the hottest Justice League stories ever in Identity Crisis, who broke the team down, choosing now to put it back together. And the way that he chooses to put it back together is also very unique. It's not a roster that you might expect. And it's one of the more fun things that spins out of Infinite Crisis. And you can't go through that without mentioning this, because Johns came home to JSA, and the post Infinite Crisis status quo really leans into this idea of legacy. But it also goes,
but he'd been writing it beforehand though too.
He jumped off of it about 8 or 10 months before Infinite Crisis. And actually, Paul Levitz finished out the previous volume.
Okay.
And then when it ended and the 1 year later stuff started, he jumped on with the beginning of a new volume. The biggest developments in the multiverse arguably happen here. And it's a fascinating series. But, another thing that it's just a 6-issue miniseries, but holy hell, if you were invested in what was going on in 52, this is a must read. This series knocked my socks off because he's in a very different place. We saw the consequences of World War III at the end of 52. He's been in hiding ever since then. And damn, like you could see what it's hinting at there on the cover.
Is it written by Tomasi?
Yeah. And it's drawn by Doug Mahnke. And he is not well. And he is madly scrambling to regain the power that he lost. But, by that same token, you're also invested in the characters of 52. Another must read is this guy.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
I have that on my wish list. Yeah.
I think I'm going to actually, I swear to you guys, I think I'm going to go to this. Like right away.
You should.
I really want to.
Honestly,
really want to.
Mr. Baby, like I actually have this in my in-stock wish list right now. Free plug for in-stock. I may pull the trigger on this one, honestly. So
well, and I don't think it's really a spoiler to say this, because one of the really cool things that the first couple of issues set up here is that everybody thinks that Booster is a misfit. Everybody. They just discount him as goofy and in it for himself. They don't know the sacrifices that he just made, because the fate of reality hangs in the balance. He needs to keep that to himself. Only one guy knows, and it's Batman. And Batman takes him aside privately to say, I know who you are. I know what you are. Thank you. I'm here if you need me.
How many issues is this?
It's only like 12 or something like that. It's not very long.
Because there's 14, because there's a 0 issue that ties back to 0 Hour, and there's a 1 million issue that ties back to DC 1
right
million.
But it didn't last very long. It was meant to be an ongoing, but it didn't have.
No, it wasn't ongoing. John, it went on long after John's left. It went.
Did he? Oh, I'm sorry, but his run is only the 14 issues.
His run was only the 14 issues. The series though went up to Flashpoint, so it went. Right
word.
The DCU.
Okay.
Jurgens took over writing it, but he's
Jurgens,
the artist on this with Jeff Johns and Jeff Katz. But it's funny. They even brought back. So if you were around during 0 Hour, they had like a foil kind of ink that they use for the metallic colors on the covers. They brought it back for the 0 issue for this series of Booster Gold, which is just kind of a cool little bit of comic book history. Like they really brought that stuff back.
It's pretty cool, because speaking of 0 Hour, the new line DC's Finest is putting out instead of the omnibuses, which I'm anti-omnibus, as Chris knows, but these new trades they're putting out.
Anti-omnibus. That's a stupid thing to be anti. You're anti.
I joke. I joke because I'm more of a trade guy. But I wanted to kind of pimp out. Just stop. I wanted to pimp out the new DC Finest books, because they're putting out some great stuff, and I cannot wait I mean, all the Legion of superhero stuff that we're doing with Joe, they're putting that out basically in that one trade. They're going to put out 0 Hour Part 1, which that's where I want to bring it up. Is like next year they're released, like, because they're basically, Mr. Baby, they're gearing up for all these new movies coming out and this new era of James Gunn. It feels like they're getting their act together and going, let's get some trades that people can go pick up. They're going to be in print. And I hate to say it, but like I missed the epic line, and I'm kicking myself for doing that. I'm not sure I'm going to miss this one. The stuff they are doing here is pretty cool. It's all over the place, and I like it.
Did you both know that next Wednesday, 2 Wednesdays from now, they're releasing a trade of all of everything Johns did in that? So it's issue 0 through 14 and the million one.
That's the one that's on his wish list for in stock.
Oh, that's the one. Oh, that's what you mean by wish list. Because I was about to pull the trigger on just volume 1 and I couldn't find the rest. But now I see that it's all right here. That will too be adding that has just been added to a pre-order list.
That series is great. I mean, if you like Ted Kord and you were sad about what happened to Ted Kord at the beginning of Infinite Crisis,
we were very affected.
If you're a fan of The Killing Joke, if you're a fan of those more cosmic kind of DC events from the 90s and the early 2000s, if you like Rip Hunter, if you like Skeets, it interweaves so many different corners of the DCU. That Booster Gold series is probably fair to characterize as like a direct sequel to 52, and that's why that's one of the reasons why it's called 52 Pickup. It's a pun, but it's also true. It's picking up right after that, and Booster Gold is arguably the poster child of 52.
So let's go back, because I don't want to spend all night. I want to get into the series a little bit, because me and Mr. Baby we both have a few nitpicks and criticisms, and I want to see if mine is Mr. Baby's as well.
Oh yeah, wait, I want you to go first.
Yeah, I'll go first. So this is almost going to be like, it's almost like I'm dogging what I think is a very obvious, like, not strength, but like, so no duh, they're going to do it this way. My only criticism of the series after reading it all the way through, and I don't know if I've said this before, is I don't like how it's all super connected. And I know that sounds weird, but I didn't really like that. I liked it when they were all separate, and it's almost like it really, to me, showed the power of the DC universe, because there's so many different aspects of it going on at the same time. It kind of tells you as a reader, like, oh my God, like, they're not all connected. Like, and I know they're not all super connected, but like, I kind of wish the Question and Matoya was separate from Black Adam. And I kind of wish that, I don't mind Black Adam at the very end being the final boss. I thought that made more sense to me because of his power level and what he went through. But with the whole, like, the Robot Men and the Metal Men, Robot Men, Metal Men, and that whole thing tying into their Black Adam thing wasn't bad. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a detriment by any means. I just think it's a little too, like, put a little nice bow on it kind of a thing. And that again, not a bad thing. It's a nitpick. I would say that's probably the thing I would say my least favorite aspect of this series is that, which is I'm just emphasizing nitpick.
Yeah, so that's not my nitpick, but that's so interesting. But I feel you. I do think there was a couple of times where I'm like, okay, it's we're showing up here, this character's showing up here, but I did enjoy that down the stretch. What I think, and this might have been just because it's not like just the way I chose to read these was closer to the show, and I would read them in like 4-issue spurts. So I would read a lot at once. I do think, in reflecting on the series and skimming back, I feel like it happened a little bit, but I felt like in the last, and it works. So this is a true nitpick. I feel like I got used to realizing there was about to be a reveal in almost every storyline. Like, there's a couple issues in a row where there's like reveal and then like characters explaining everything. So like the Ralph one was like, haha, I trapped you this whole time and blah blah blah. And then the crocodile thing happened and it's like I'm bad and I wanted to eat him this whole time. Haha. And then David Carter is supernova in space, and he's like, do you see, remember the first time? He's been here with me the whole time helping. And it's like, okay, there was a couple in a row. And so then I started going into issues, and maybe this is actually like a positive thing on the other side, is I did start going into issues like not trusting anyone or anything. So I think that actually was an effective thing they did. So as much as it is a true nitpick, because like I said, I loved how everything turned out, and I think those last couple issues are epic in terms of everything that happens. I did smile once I got to like the third one. I'm like, oh, there's another haha, this is actually what's going on. But at the same time, the Sobek stuff, Chris, I'm with you. As much as I'm like, oh man, of course he turned on him, I'm like, wow, he murked him really bad, dude. That was disturbing. When he's describing how his organs felt like fresh grapes popping in his mouth, I said, oh man, they cooked with those lines, man. So as much as I do feel like I was getting kind of like, and I didn't think about those till after I was done reading. I was like, oh, okay, all those stories definitely had a thing that was turned on its head. But then I liked all those reveals anyway. I liked what happened with Ralph, right? Because there's some character realization that happened there, and the Sobek thing is really what triggered an incredible kind of turn for Black Adam, which, you know, he ends up being one of the huge final threats. And man, I love the Black Adam stuff in here. What have I told you guys every episode, right? The more I read about this Black Adam stuff, I hate The Rock playing him more and more. Yeah, like immensely. But yeah, so that's my only real like nitpick.
Well, and before I let you have it, Chris, I think I think it's fascinating too. Your nitpick is I think completely valid, and I totally see what you're saying, because I'm like, oh, you're right, because they had the reveal of the guy, actually, I've been on to you the whole time. And then it's like that the crocodile's like, I love eating people. I was a you know, and then it's like Supernova. I'm like, wasn't he Booster Gold? Actually, I'm that guy from the very beginning you completely forgot about. I'm like, oh yeah, that guy. I'm like,
but I like that pull, because, you know, it's funny.
I agree.
I was halfway through and I'm like, is that guy ever coming back? Like, is he just gone? Like, that poor guy was just lured by Skeets. I'm like, oh, he's like one of the biggest heroes. The football spike thing, though, guys, this is not hyperbole. That was so dope. That was so hard. Like, the throwing the football and catching it, the spike. I'm like, hell yeah. Guys will read this and say, hell yeah. You know what I mean? This is how I felt reading that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I want to say that, you know, that it's I love how we both claim, like, we nitpick different aspects that aren't like awful things about it, but like they're nothing's perfect, right? But I definitely feel that, again, it's not a detriment, because this is like commercialized storytelling, and you have to have it, like, you have to do certain aspects in a way to appease to a massive audience, and that's going to appeal more to a massive audience than to, like, I say, hardcore comic book fans who are like, you know, superheroes. You know, it's meant to get, again, which is good. It's meant to get different readers in there and kind of whet their appetites. So I would say, like, it's both those nitpicks are, I think, legitimate gripes, but they're not a detriment by any means to the overall story, because it's still a really damn good series.
Yeah, it is. I mean, at the end of the day, in terms of the convergence of the storylines, I just don't quite see it the way that you do, Paul.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you.
Like, I get it. I get where you're coming from, but I think at the end of the day, I found that journey very rewarding as a fan, and as just, you know, Black Adam, I think, is the key to bringing multiple subplots together, and I think it's appropriate. He's gone through such a tumultuous journey, and his threat has built up to such a level. And, you know, World War III actually extends beyond 52. They released a 4-issue series the same day that issue 50 came out, depicting World War III to expand on other corners of the conflict. And I mean, it was pretty immense. It's not necessary reading, which is why I didn't even mention it. But I just thought it was interesting that they wanted to give it an even broader canvas to show the other corners of what that conflict represented. But I mean, also too, I mean, Mr. Mind ended up being
That was crazy. Yeah.
like maybe he's the real final boss. Like the big knockdown drag out fight that gets everybody in is Black Adam, but Rip Hunter and Booster Gold realize, oh God, we have to stop him because that's multiple realities that he could destroy. And the idea of trying to keep the multiverse a secret is something that I found pretty intoxicating. That didn't stay the status quo for very long after 52 was finished. In fact, they used to do DC Nation columns at the end of every DC book. And Dan DiDio put a hint in one of the columns where it's like you took the first letter of every paragraph and it said the secret of 52 is that the multiverse still exists. And this was weeks before the end
I
of the
remember that. I remember hearing about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Which was a choice. I kind of wish that they would have saved it and not spoiled it. But you know, in the end, like I see where you're coming from, and Nico, I see where you're coming from too. But you know, in the moment, I can totally empathize. But after the fact, when you take this immense project that had the technically 5 greatest writers of DC of their era, all contributing to a shared narrative with so many different corners of this universe that did not include the most identifiable characters. This series is an utter achievement. And DC tried, we mentioned this a couple of times over the course of this read through, but they tried to repeat the success of this, and they didn't come anywhere close to matching just the narrative strength that was on display in every single one of these issues.
Well, I mean, again, I don't know who the other writers and artists were involved, but I think it was such an inspired idea.
Yeah.
Not to mention, you have, you know, maybe some of the greatest, not just comic writers in DC, but writers, period, in the medium right now. Look at, because, you know, I've been reading Jeff Johns' Ghost Machine stuff, you know, right now, and it's fantastic.
I gotta get Red Coat.
Homie, I got it all, and I you know, I've been there from the beginning, right? I've been picking up Geiger from the beginning, and you know, is it, I forget, is it Joe? Is it Robot Joe? Is that? I forgot.
Junkyard Joe.
Junkyard Joe. I always forget his name. I always want to call it G.I. Joe. It's not G.I. Joe. But no, Junkyard Joe, and then you've got the unnamed, and then you also have the Jason Fabok stuff with Rook Exodus, and it just, as I read all of it over the weekend that came out. It all came out last week, and then this week I got more involved in it again, kind of catching up.
Dude knows what he's doing. Knows what he's doing.
Well, and as I'm reading these comics, and I think Jeff Johns has always been a phenomenal writer, I'm like, God damn, like Jeff Johns is a good writer. He's a good writer. And I just think that, like, having that, he's such an inspired idea guy, and he's such a great executionist with his stories. Not perfect. I don't love Doomsday Clock as much as other people, Chris. But
ooh, dropping the hot takes.
Well, that's not a hot take.
They hired Stephen Wacker.
They hired. This is not a hot take. This is reality. This is. I mean, in hindsight, that was a good idea too. The difference is they didn't have the guy like Jeff Johns to spearhead it. They had Dan Slott, but he wasn't like above everybody else yet. He eventually grew into that role. But
the collaboration for that did not seem as close as this.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%.
As much as I respect people like Dan Slott and Mark Guggenheim and Bob Gale. I mean, how could you not
No.
respect?
No.
Back to the Future made me
No.
instant.
No.
I respect Bob
No.
Gale. I do.
No. I don't respect God.
I don't agree with him very much, but I respect.
I respect Bob Gale for Back to the Future, and that's about it.
Oh, damn.
I mean, I think he took some
Tell me
swings,
more.
but eventually
some
Mark
swings.
Waid became involved with that. Was Mark Waid involved from the outset in Brand New
No,
Day?
he came later on.
That's what I thought. So, but I mean, the collaboration that you hear about between Rucka, Johns,
Yes.
Waid, and Morrison. Why would I forget that name? But also Keith Giffen. I mean, all those guys credit Keith Giffen
Giffen's huge. Yeah.
for being like the thing that keeps the consistency of the entirety of the series.
Yep.
This was such close collaboration. Brand New Day doesn't come anywhere near this. You could argue that the magnitude of Brand New Day was just as intense, maybe, but it doesn't hit this. And that's okay. Like, they wanted to take that swing. It came out how it came out. There were more good issues of Brand New Day than bad ones in my humble opinion. But this series, hearing you guys describe just the additional appreciation that you have been able to grab for the DC universe as a whole. I mean, that was when we started this, that was exactly what I was hoping would happen, because that's what happened to me. And I want to share the love. And this series is a very good reason to share it. I mean, you saw every corner. So when you come in later and you pick up issues of Detective or Wonder Woman or Booster Gold or Birds of Prey or the Suicide Squad or Secret Six, another great series that came up from the aftermath of Infinite Crisis, there's just so much more recognizability if you've gone on this journey and you really understand this was such a cohesive era for the DC universe. And it's certainly one that I miss. But that, not to take away from what's going on right now, I'm not one of those people, one of those curmudgeonly old guys with gray in his hair being like, it was better when I was. No, the book's
DC's doing well now. I think DC's doing fantastic now.
They're in a great place. I mean, it's probably the nostalgia talking, but when you have Rucka, Waid, Morrison, and Johns at the top of a book, I mean, those guys were instantly and forever rock stars in my mind after 52.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And I want to make that very clear that I think that DC kind of was very stagnant for a long time, and Marvel's kind of in the same boat right now, I think, a little bit. But DC's coming out of it
for a while. Yeah, you could.
Yeah, but DC's starting to come out of it, and they're putting out some of my favorite books now. Birds of Prey. I love Detective. I love what else? I mean, there's I had to stop buying everything, but I've read all of Superman. I mean, I'm keeping up with Superman through the trades, and I've loved. I can't wait for volume 2 of Josh Williams' Superman. I thought volume 1 was fantastic. And even the Batman title, Zardarsky, has been good. I'm really behind on it, but I mean, there are a ton of DC. I'm reading Shazam. Shazam with Mark Waid was fun. I think he just jumped off recently though, but Shazam was a lot of fun. So there's like a lot. Was that
Nightwing? Yeah, Nightwing I want to get back into it, but Nightwing was really strong there.
I like Titans too with Taylor, Tom Taylor, but I only have so much money, and there's some good Marvel stuff.
Tom King's Wonder Woman too.
Yeah,
things.
Yeah, I've heard. DC is putting out world. Thank you, Javi. World's Finest. I've only heard fantastic things about this title by Mark Waid, and I have that on my wish list as well. So, in fact, all this is like I gotta maybe just pull a massive, pull the trigger on the massive.
But all that to say that, yeah, I mean, they're in a great spot right now, but I mean, the strength of the line coming out of 52, like the world was their oyster. I mean, we had barely scratched the surface at this time of Johns' run on Green Lantern. Morrison was just getting ready to kick in on Batman. You had Detective that was going into Paul Dini. Paul, you and I read some of those issues when this was still a podcast, and those issues are incredible still.
Yeah, those are great.
Greenberg on Wonder Woman, Meltzer on Justice League. This was an embarrassment of riches. And I mean, there were some bad books too in there. Of course, there's always going to be, but in terms of like the marquee characters and even the characters that aren't as marquee, uh, incredibly strong. And I think that 52 helped establish such a solid foundation, turning Lex Luthor back into a conniving supervillain while including his backstory as a businessman. That to me is a brilliant stroke that came out of 52, combining the two predominant conceptions of Lex Luthor to become a new kind of villainous force in the DCU in a way that he hadn't been in quite a long time. And then later on, he links up with Brainiac and it takes the Superman books in a really interesting direction. New Krypton is a whole thing. And I think that it is better than people give it credit for. The only reason that people don't talk about it now is because people only seem to like to talk about the things they hate. And with New Krypton, its sin was that it wasn't bad. So it was just, it wasn't, it ended in a way that wasn't as strong as the way that it began. And it occupies kind of a Clone Saga-ish territory with Superman, I think, at least in the modern era. But setting all that stuff up with Lex Luthor and Brainiac, Batman, of course, going up against the Black Glove, Green Lantern, this led to reasonably directly toward the Sinestro Corps War, which is a story that arguably put Green Lantern on the map and the popularity of which led to the development of a movie. I mean, people might not like the movie, but still, the popularity of the Green Lantern books cannot or should not be understated.
Surprised they haven't. It's been so long since they tried to do something again.
I've talked a lot. I'm sorry. I'm going to shut up. I love this.
No, we can wrap up here. But in a second. But yeah, I'm with you, Nico. It feels like, well, I think right now, I know with the Green Lantern books, Jeremy Adams and Eddie Johnson are both doing some cool, fun stuff over there, from what I understand. And money has just been so tight. I can't buy all the books. I wanted to buy at least the PKJ books, but I couldn't get it. But I buy Hulk on the reg, and I'm buying Superman in trade, so I'm supporting my boy that way. But yeah, I think that there's a lot to be excited about, and I think that this era is really fun to mine as we're doing that. And yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll kind of wrap it up here, Mr. Baby. Give me your final thoughts on the new 52, the 52 series we just kind of wrapped up here.
Yeah, no, Chris, I said this at the top when you weren't on yet, so I wanted you to have a chance to hear this. But what a journey this was! The reverendation. What do I call it? Reverend recommendation went so hard as always, and I think your goal was absolutely accomplished. So thank you so much for taking us on this journey,
thank you for indulging me, because I grabbed both you guys and I grew a third arm, and I grabbed your dad too, even though he's loving stories, and I just dragged you through from the beginning of Infinite Crisis, being like, here's why you guys need to check out this era of DC Comics. You're all caught up now. I've got very little to teach you both. And I'm very glad.
The Reverend has spoken. His sermon is over.
I knew that you guys would be into this. All of this entire thing is just all to be able to say, hey guys, wasn't that cool?
No,
it was.
Yeah, and I want to make it very clear. Like, I'm glad. I've always wanted to read it, because even when I got back into comic books and this was going on, it always interested me. Always did. I'm like, that's really interesting what they're doing there with the whole idea. So it was cool to kind of know what's going on, have an Infinite Crisis, and going into this. I think this, again, maybe when the DC, the Gods and Monsters phase goes through and is huge, we can go do like a retrospective of this again, and maybe bring on some other people to make them read it, and we can bring them on and see if we can pick their brain about it, because it feels like this is definitely the textbook. Without having to read a textbook, 52 is literally the best learning experience about the greater DC universe besides the top three. So
Way more educational than even the new 52, which itself was ostensibly designed to bring in new readers, right? I mean, you know more about the DC universe now than you maybe ever have because of this series. Is that a fair thing to say?
No, absolutely. I've said it from the beginning, and I want to say too, like this beats reading a Wikipedia any day of the week, or like, or having. I mean, no offense to you, but even having like your best friend, like you, tell me about it. I'd rather read it. I'd rather do it this and talk about it with you after we, like we're doing. So
it only took me 13 years to get you to finally read this. So.
There a lot's happened in 13 years. Come on, you got
right?
I told you I would one day. I'm a man of my word. One eventually.
You did.
So
you did. I give you your flowers, sir. You were right.
That's right. Goddamn right. All right. So we'll head out of here. Mr. Baby, what? I know you're up to shenanigans.
The shenanigans.
You got shenanigans going on. Tell everyone what your shenanigans are.
I do. Well, here's the one I'll say first is I think this is the first time I've been 2 weeks in a row on the comic binge with the Spidey Council last week. And then 52 this week. We've had shows close, but I don't know if they've ever been 2 weeks in a row. Hey, so comic binge last week. Check it out if you like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Vigilante 39 for everything else. We just talked about the Joker trailer, which was fire in our humble opinion, and we speculated. We talked about the Silver Surfer casting, and then some speculatory Superman stuff from James Gunn. And at TikTok, at Nico Knows Film, seen a lot of movies lately. Got to be putting up a lot of videos and reviews. So come find the shenanigans and with me, if that makes sense. I don't know.
No, I always value, I always when I need to know about if a movie's good or I need to know the hype about a movie coming up, it's always Nico, Mr. Baby, putting out his feelers like, I saw this independent film, and I'm like, okay, Nico, I'm good. I can live vicariously through him.
I can live, you can live through me. I love that. Thank you for that.
I do. I always tell people. I told people on the MCU fan show last week, about watching Ozark, and I said, there's a lot of shows that in like probably 20, 30 years I'll be able to watch, because I won't be as busy, probably, because I won't have it. I'll probably be driven off of YouTube or canceled or something like that, and like I'll have no life.
What did you do?
What was that?
What did you do?
No, I will be canceled in 20 years. Like, who knows what I'll do, or offend somebody.
Just don't do stupid shit. You'll be fine.
All right. And I'm joking. But anyway, my point is this. I'll have more time in like 30 years, and Ozark is one of those shows I want to go back and actually watch, So that's on there. But yeah, go check out Nico. He's got great stuff up there. Man. Remember, Nico, I got to get you on for next month. You might be on 2. Remember, there's a Mad Max episode we're gonna be doing.
We're doing that. Oh okay, yeah, I remember. That. Trust me.
I gotta send you the script still too.
Please.
I'm not sure if I have or not, but
either
way,
send it.
I will. Either way, he will be back next month for a couple times. We have Spider-Man Council and a very special Mad Max episode. Reverend partner. Thank you for making me read this. I'm glad I did. I've been telling you that for a long. I want to read it, but I'm glad I finally read it.
I'm not blowing smoke, man. It's a good series. I'm glad that you and I'm glad that you got the proper context in Infinite Crisis ahead of time, because I think it just makes the final bite of the apple all the sweeter, or when the grapes pop in your mouth and the juice is better, right?
Yeah, that was yeah.
If anybody is so inclined, Star Trek Discovery has just premiered its final season, season 5, and an episode of Discovery Debrief is now live, including very special guest and Speed Force scholar, Mr. Javi Trujillo. So please,
Corazon.
Check out the most recent episode of that, and then of course all the great stuff that we have coming down the pike in the comic bitch.
Out of control. Next week, Chris, I don't hope you haven't forgotten. We have Ricky Church coming back next week, and we're doing the first 6 issues of Justice.
I just had my order for the Absolute Edition confirmed. of that.
Really?
Yeah. Or wait, no, I'm sorry. It's DC. It's World's Greatest Heroes, the Paul Dini, Alex Ross
Right.
collaborations. That's
And this is
getting
not.
into
Yeah, but anyway. So next week
You're talking Jim Kruger, Alex Ross.
Yeah. So next week we're doing that, and that's gonna be really interesting. It's 12 issues. I told Ricky I didn't know I do all 12. We're gonna do the first 6, and we'll kind of talk about if we want if we're gonna read more or not. We'll find out next week. But it's interesting. It's a good piggybacking off of this, to be quite honest,
Sure.
in my opinion. So next week, Jim Kruger, Alex Ross, Justice, Ricky Church will be joining us. A lot of fun next Wednesday. So it'll be the 17th. A lot of fun there. And go like, subscribe if you watch this far. You're a baller. Appreciate it. Got lots of great episodes next month. I've got a Twitter, I guess I call him a Twitter comic book person, or an ex comic book person, Exalted Speed 2099. He's going to come on and talk about his favorite history books about comic books. So he's going to jump on and we're going to talk about that. I'll kind of grill him for some just, in general, hang out, whatever. It'll be a lot of fun. And then we also have, next month, we're going to be talking about some X-Men 97 stuff. I have Sean from Legends of Grayskull. He's coming back. He originally did a He-Man episode. He's going to come back. We're going to talk about an X-Factor series, which I'm pretty sure is going to talk about maybe a spoiler in the show, which I don't want to know about. I'm not caught up yet, so we'll find out. But Mr. Baby, if you want in on that one, it's only 3 issues, so it's just, but that'll be a lot of fun. We got a special Mad Max episode next month, and we got Spider-Man Council coming back. So, and who knows when the hell Knights Never Die come back. So,
Soon.
Lots of fun stuff soon. Anyway, Chris, why don't you take us out, my friend?
Read more comics.